The story follows a woman whose husband humiliates her by abandoning her in the pouring rain to teach her a lesson. She feels shattered and betrayed, but then an unexpected figure steps in, her loyal bodyguard. What begins as a moment of despair turns into shocking empowerment, revenge, and a twist her husband never saw coming. The rain was relentless, hammering down against the pavement as if the sky itself had chosen this night to betray me. My hair clung to my face, soaked and heavy, my dress plastered against my skin, shivering with every gust of wind. And there he was, my husband, standing in the glow of his car headlights, smirking, his arms crossed as if he had won some cruel game. He had told me I needed to learn a lesson, that I was too proud, too stubborn, too difficult. And in his twisted mind, leaving me stranded in the storm was the perfect punishment. His words echoed in my head, sharp as glass. Maybe when you're cold and alone, you'll finally understand your place. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The man I trusted, the man I once believed would protect me, had turned into a stranger. Each drop of rain felt heavier, almost mocking me, amplifying my humiliation. People passed by, umbrellas shielding their heads, eyes darting at me with pity before quickly looking away. I felt invisible, discarded like nothing. And then he laughed. Not a soft laugh, not one of amusement, but a laugh laced with cruelty. He stepped into his car, rolled down the window, and said, "Maybe next time you'll think twice before crossing me." The engine roared, and in an instant, his car disappeared into the storm, leaving only the fading glow of his taillights and the echo of betrayal pounding in my chest. I stood frozen. My legs refused to move, my mind spinning between rage and heartbreak. The rain blurred everything, the streetlights, the buildings, even the ground beneath me. But what hurt most wasn't the cold or the wetness seeping into my bones. It was the realization that the person I had built my life around had left me there deliberately. A voice in my head whispered, "Is this love? Is this marriage? Is this what I gave up everything for?" The city around me felt louder, crueler, uncaring. Cars rushed past, splashing muddy water onto my already ruined dress. My phone buzzed in my purse, but my hands shook too much to answer.
I didn't want to talk.
I didn't want anyone to hear me like this, weak, broken, humiliated. And then, out of nowhere, a beam of headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV slowed beside me, its tinted window rolling down just enough for me to hear a familiar voice.
Calm, strong.
The kind of voice that could silence chaos with a single word. "Miss, get inside." My heart skipped. It was him, my bodyguard. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to follow me tonight. Yet somehow he had. His presence was a shield, a reminder that even in this storm, even in this betrayal, I wasn't truly alone. For a second, pride held me back. The same pride my husband accused me of. But then lightning tore across the sky, thunder rumbling deep in the distance, and I realized something. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival. I opened the door and slid inside. The warmth hit me immediately, the faint scent of leather and cologne wrapping around me like a protective blanket. My bodyguard glanced at me, his eyes sharp but filled with something I hadn't expected. Concern. Real concern. "Did he really just leave you out there?" he asked, his voice low, almost dangerous. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. He said I needed to learn a lesson. For a moment, silence filled the car. Then, slowly, his hands tightened around the steering wheel. His jaw clenched. He didn't need to say anything. I could feel the anger radiating off him. Not the reckless anger of someone looking for a fight, but the quiet, controlled fury of a man who had just witnessed an injustice he could not ignore. And suddenly, the storm outside didn't seem as loud anymore, because the storm inside the car was even stronger. As the SUV pulled forward, I stared out the window, watching raindrops race each other across the glass. My chest ached, but not just from betrayal. Something else was stirring inside me. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Was it safety? Was it defiance? Or was it simply the realization that the man who vowed to protect me had abandoned me, while the man who was paid to protect me chose to stay? I thought back to all the little moments, times when my husband had dismissed me, silenced me, made me feel small. And then, the quiet gestures of my bodyguard, opening doors, standing in the shadows, watching, waiting, ensuring no harm ever came my way. Tonight, those two worlds collided, and the contrast was blinding. "Where do you want to go?" he asked softly. The question broke me, because the truth was I didn't know. My home no longer felt like home. My marriage no longer felt like love. My entire reality had cracked in one cruel moment under the rain. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Anywhere but here." And without hesitation, he pressed his foot on the accelerator. The SUV glided through the storm, steady and unshaken, as if no force of nature could touch it. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something I thought I had lost forever: hope. But little did I know, this was only the beginning. Because while I sat in silence, piecing together the shards of my broken dignity, my bodyguard was making decisions of his own. Decisions that would not only change the way I saw him, but would also shake the very foundation of the life my husband thought he controlled. And deep down, a part of me knew my husband had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but inside the SUV, the silence was deafening. My bodyguard's eyes stayed fixed on the road, sharp and unyielding, while my own thoughts spun in circles. My husband's voice still echoed in my mind, but now it was being drowned out by another sound, the steady beat of my heart, growing louder with every passing mile. He finally spoke, his tone measured but firm. "Do you realize what he just did? That wasn't about teaching you a lesson. That was about control. He wanted to see you suffer." His words cut deeper than the cold rain ever could, because they were true, and hearing them out loud made my chest tighten until it was almost impossible to breathe. I whispered, almost to myself, and I let him. I stood there. I didn't fight back. He shook his head, eyes briefly glancing at me before returning to the road. "Don't confuse survival with weakness. You didn't fight back because you were blindsided. But now you know who he really is." That single sentence hit me harder than any storm. Now you know who he really is. For years I had defended him, excused his temper, convinced myself that every cruel word, every cold look, was just stress, just pressure, just a bad day. But tonight stripped away all excuses. Tonight, there was no mask left to hide behind. We pulled into a quiet street, far from the city noise. The SUV idled beneath a flickering streetlight, the only sound the soft hum of the engine. My bodyguard finally turned to face me, his expression steady, but his eyes burning with something dangerous. "You don't have to go back," he said quietly. "You don't have to give him the satisfaction of seeing you crawl back to him." For a moment, the weight of his words paralyzed me. Don't go back. Could it really be that simple? To walk away from the man who had vowed to love me, yet delighted in my pain? To leave behind years of broken promises and shattered trust? My chest ached at the thought, but it was an ache that felt less like heartbreak and more like release. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time, I forced myself to look. His name lit up the screen. My husband. Calling. Again. My fingers trembled. Should I answer? Should I let him hear the fury, the devastation in my voice? Or should I let the silence answer for me? I pressed the green button. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was sharp, impatient. "Don't think you can just disappear. You'll come home right now, or you'll regret it." My bodyguard's jaw tightened as he listened. His hand flexed around the steering wheel, veins standing out against his skin. Something inside me snapped. My voice, though quiet, carried a strength I hadn't heard in myself for years. "You left me in the rain, and you think I'm coming back?" There was a pause. Then laughter, cold, dismissive, the same laugh he had given me on the street. "You're nothing without me. You'll crawl back. You always do." And then click. He hung up. For a long moment, I stared at the dark screen. My reflection stared back, rain-streaked hair, swollen eyes, but behind the exhaustion was something new. Resolve. My bodyguard's voice broke the silence. He thinks you're weak. He thinks you'll fold like you always have. But you don't have to. You can change the ending. I turned to him, searching his face. And what if I can't? What if he breaks me again? His gaze was steady, unwavering. Then he'll have to go through me first. The weight of those words pressed against the air between us. It wasn't just protection he was offering, it was loyalty, fierce and unshakable, the kind I had never once received from the man I called my husband. The SUV rolled forward again, the city lights coming back into view. My phone buzzed once more, but this time it wasn't a call. It was a message.
Short.
Ruthless. You'll pay for this. I should have been terrified. But instead, a strange calm settled over me. Because in that moment I realized something. He was the one who was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of losing the one thing he thought he owned, me. My bodyguard parked outside a hotel, the kind of discreet place where no one asked questions. He turned off the engine, then looked at me as if waiting for a decision. Do you want to go inside, rest, think? Or do you want me to take you somewhere else? I hesitated. My whole life, every choice I had made was to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to survive under the shadow of a man who thrived on dominance. But tonight was different. Tonight I had been thrown into the storm and left for dead, and somehow I had survived. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Good, because he's not expecting that. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of quiet planning. Conversations whispered over steaming cups of coffee, my bodyguard laying out every option, every step forward, while I slowly began to find my voice again. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing. I was reclaiming. But the real moment came later, when the storm had finally passed, and dawn crept over the city in streaks of pale gold.
My phone buzzed again.
Another message. This time, a single word. Home. I stared at it for a long time, the weight of his command pressing against me like chains I had worn for too long. Then, slowly, deliberately, I placed the phone face down on the table and whispered, "No." My bodyguard's eyes met mine, steady, approving. In that silence, a decision had been made. My husband thought the rain was enough to break me. He thought humiliation would shatter my spirit. But he was wrong, because what he created instead was fire. And now he would face it. As the sun rose higher, warming the streets still wet from last night's storm, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. And my husband, the man who left me in the rain, was about to learn the hardest lesson of all.